Europa League game on the Air Sport Pack.
This is News Talk.
You're very welcome back. It is time for our review of the Sunday papers. I'm joined in studio by Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent and Hugh Farrelly, rugby writer with the Irish Daily Mail. Thanks for coming in, lads.
No worries.
The headlines then, understandably, it is all about the Irish rugby team. The Sunday Independent sport is Green Day, Ireland celebrate historic Grand Slam, and the picture is of Rob Kearney with the Six Nations trophy above his head. The Sunday Times shows Jacob Stockdale at full stretch trying to tap the ball down for Ireland's third try. Not bad for a scummy nation, eh, Eddie? Is the headline. England coach forced to eat humble pie as rampant Ireland run out 24-15 winners to take Grand Slam. The Irish Mail on Sunday, the greatest. Ireland earned their place in history with Grand Slam win for the ages. And also Jose and United, they may have reached the FA Cup semi-finals, but all is not well at Old Trafford. The Irish Sunday Mirror, Pog shock, Stars agent begins sounding out buyers for Manchester United flop, and the grand prize, Ireland makes Six Nations history at Twickenham. In the People Sport, poetry in motion, a picture of Mo Salah and VAR is the headline. Pochettino, I'd rather see referees make mistakes. It's a nightmare, the controversy, even though Spurs won around VAR. And the Sunday World goes with best party ever, Ireland's Paddy's Day celebrations. So really only one story in town. Is this a huge day for the papers? You just have to look at the wraparound advertisements with all the Irish rugby sponsors on all the sports sections today.
I think it's we all know newspapers are fighting for their lives now with the internet and all that, but this is a souvenir day, and it's about capturing the epic, really, isn't it, on these kind of days. And I think the papers have done really well today. And if you're could do worse than go down the shop, buy 2 or 3 papers and just sit back and read the coverage, because I think it's excellent. Like in newspapers, what they have, like, history needs hard copy. You won't be looking back in 10 years' time on your phone to get the true sense of what happened yesterday. But if you have a copy from today, you'll get a really good value for it. And the pictures alone, I mean, there's huge pictures. It just sums it all up,
On days like yesterday, if you're reporting at the game, do you have half your piece written already?
It's a tough one, because there's a risk with that as well, isn't there, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly a bit of that in some of the coverage today, and I'm sure tomorrow, I'm sure it'll be more the same tomorrow. I know our own paper is planning a big supplement, and I'm sure other papers will be too. It probably helped that it was a 2:45 kickoff yesterday, that if the game had been the third game, the last game, the Wales-France one, there might have been a bit more bother. But you can even see, I think, certainly in the Sunday Times and the Sunday Indo, that there are pieces looking ahead. I think Brendan Fanning has one about a strategic plan, and I think Peter O'Reilly has one. Is it's sort of a World Cup based thing, and that is naturally, as you're aware, I'm not a huge sort of rugby aficionado. I might be here because of weather reasons today, but don't want to bring up the fact that could have been
people don't need to peek behind the curtain.
Last minute sub.
This was all very planned.
But it's clear that the debate has shifted in some way towards the Rugby World Cup now, and papers would have had stuff prepared in advance that I would have assumed if Ireland had lost yesterday. Some of those pieces would have stood as I assume as Six Nations champions, but it would have been harder. So I assume there's an element of nerves about these plans, these wraparounds, these supplements, because obviously if they'd lost, things would have gone pretty flat, and you might have to review your wraparound plan. So I think time was on their side yesterday, but they still have done a good job to.
Your general frustration then lies in the fact that the great moment in Irish rugby happens in the middle of a Saturday afternoon. There's time for thought, there's time for prose, there's time to actually think about what you're going to write, whereas Robbie Brady scores at 10:30 at night, and Leal, you've got 20 minutes to get your copy in.
Yeah, it's pretty much 6 pars about the goal, and then 800 words from what happened earlier in the match. And certainly it is an advantage with the old afternoon kickoffs when it comes to that it gives you a bit more time. I know we were talking outside there about your views on player ratings, and do you like player ratings or not, and generally they're the bane of a reporter's lives, but I don't mind them when you have a bit of time to do them, and I think
otherwise they're pointless.
Yeah, well, the problem is that sometimes they're done on the rush. You talk about those nights, those Leal nights and so on, those 7:45 kickoffs. It's very hard. You need an hour to think about it as much as is possible, and I think it just comes across that even the various columnists in the papers today have had time to do pieces rather than do stuff that's blatantly run a play based copy. You know, they've had a bit of time to tactically go into things a bit more, as opposed to, you can always tell, maybe the reader can't always tell, and maybe we overanalyze it in papers, but you can tell the difference between, you know, the afternoon kickoff and the evening in terms of the quality of the stuff that's out there.
It still takes a fair bit of doing, though, you know. I mean, the Times produced a supplement within the sports section, and because I was wondering why Peter O'Reilly didn't do more in the match, and then you turn inside and you see that. I know the Mail's got a big supplement plan tomorrow, the Indo, and as Dan said, that bit of extra time, it really helps, because there's just great reading in today's papers, you know, and it's what you want to be reading, not just, as Dan says, you don't want run and play, you know, everyone watch the match. It's about where it goes from here and how you kick it on, you know.
Generally on a Sunday when you pick up the papers, who do you look for?
I'm a huge Neil Francis fan. Going back to his playing days, I know his Frano's career takes a bit of a kicking. Like he's a figure who courts controversy, but I remember him as a phenomenal player. Now he was accused of like slipping in and out of matches and stuff, but when he was at his best, he was.
Did you play against him? Did you ever play against him?
I don't think I ever came up against him. No.
What level did you play to?
Just club level AIL for a few years.
You played most under 20, I think, did you? You're telling us he doesn't like to talk about his. He doesn't like to talk about his career. Just the odd anecdote every so often will pop out.
No, like you read Martin Johnson's book or John Neal's autobiography, two best seconders ever played, and they both single out Frano for mention, you know. But in terms of what he does for the paper, like he gets like there's a tendency in modern rugby journalism or modern rugby writing to try and kind of echo the Joe Schmidt forensic stuff. So you've a lot of talk about soft shoulders in the 28th minute, we hit this line and this to that. Now that works online, like Murray Kinsley does very well in the 42 with video clips and stuff, but in print I struggle with that. Whereas Frano, because it's just too in depth. Like you're never going to be at the level that Schmidt and his coaching team are, so why try and reach that? I mean, I know there's new people coming into the game and they want to learn about the game and all that, but like the job, if you're writing a piece for the paper, your job is to entertain people. I find that stuff very dense, you know, and Frano gets the entertainment thing. I mean, even his intro today, and the responsorial Sam is, Joe is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. You know, it's just a nice way to go into stuff. You know, I always remember an intro he did a few years ago. He wrote, there's only three types of people in this world, those that can count and those that can't, you know. It's just someone I'd always turn to. But like, he's not alone today. I mean, Shane McGrath's done a really nice piece in the Mail, colour again, Brendan Fanning's piece that Dan referred to, you know. So it's just a really good day for reading.
So we might start on Neil Francis' piece, where one of the more interesting parts is he says Johnny Sexton's our best at half, our most important player in history. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I see Stuart Barnes was writing about the greatest, you know, Irish team and comparing the 09, and he went for O'Gara at 10, which is a big call on the back of, I would have always been an O'Gara man, considering what he did under pressure, but I think that the Sexton's act in Paris is a game changer, you know. I mean, that was just phenomenal. The fact he was playing yesterday, there was suggestions he was playing with a broken nose. Now, Joe Schmidt said that wasn't the case this morning, but it was still the bravery he has, and I think it'd be pretty hard to say that. I never saw Jack Kyle play, obviously, but I think Sexton would be up there now.
He says as well, the English rugby team operates in two states, complacency and panic, which is pretty accurate.
Yeah, it's funny, the English media would be famous for changing with the wind, you know, and I remember only a few weeks ago before the Scotland game, there was headlines like, Eddie's the perfect fit for this team, you know, and now he's getting savaged, and justifiably so. I mean, at the moment you'd be saying he'd be doing well to hold on to the World Cup.
You wrote about Schmidt in the Mail today and in praise of Joe Schmidt, and it's good to actually get the reminder that like Joe Schmidt wasn't always the greatest coach in world rugby, and that when he arrived in Ireland back in 2010 there was a bit of shock that they had gone for this almost unknown assistant coach, and that it didn't actually start very well.
Yeah, I was talking to Dan about it outside. It's like almost like sliding doors. He had a horrendous start. They had 3 losses in their first 4 games, including an awful loss in Treviso. And you kind of expect the Kiwi guys coming over, you know, like Steve Hansen, big, dour, aggressive. And he was taken over from Michael Cheika, who had that type of personality. And this guy comes in lovely, you know, fresh face, smiley. You know, we didn't know anything about him. Now, we knew Leo Cullen and Johnny Sexton had apparently been part of the interview process, so that he had the approval of the squad and stuff. But it was very.
So they were Sexton and Cullen were on the panel.
Yeah, apparently so. Yeah, they were like leaders in the team, and they had to kind of give this guy. I mean, you know, the Sexton Schmidt link is goes way back. There's implicit trust and all that. But it was a rocky start, and I remember writing that you have to give everyone patience, but their patience was wearing thin in terms of editorial in some area. Like George Hook was the most famous one who came out and said, "Is this guy up to the job?" And it got to the point where they lost to Edinburgh in the fourth. I think his fourth game, the Magners League as it was then, and we went out to David Lloyd's Centre for the normal Monday press conference where you might get a Noel Reid or a kind of a squad member, and they brought up Brian O'Driscoll and sat him next to Schmidt, and Schmidt looked kind of shell shocked, and it was a full we were fully behind Joe. It was the real, as we said in soccer terms, the dreaded overconfidence. Yeah. And the following game was Munster in Lansdowne Road, and if they'd lost that, you wonder, it would have just ratcheted up again. But they won it narrowly. I think it was 13-9 or something, and then they just kicked on from there.
Yeah, interesting as well, and so important, I guess, that it was Brian O'Driscoll who came out and pleaded for patience. Like, you think of maybe the most obvious Irish football example where the 5-6 senior players came out
before
Staunton.
Yeah.
And nobody was fully convinced, and in fact, if anything, it probably fanned the flames a little bit further. But having Brian O'Driscoll go out, plead for patience, that he wouldn't do that unless he actually believed it.
Yeah, he's written about that since, that he just knew the level of detail in training, and it takes a while for a coach to bed in, obviously, but like he just knew they were onto a winner here. So him coming out was, and it did, once they beat Munster, as they say, they won he won the European Cup at the end of his first year with the famous comeback against Northampton, But it's just where he's come from that point to this. I wouldn't.
Do you know what Leinster saw in him back then?
They would have come up against Clermont a fair bit, and Clermont's attack was pretty phenomenal, and Schmidt was responsible for that, so they saw something there. Plus they kind of plucked Cheika from relative obscurity as well. He'd been coaching Randwick, so there was a template for bringing somebody out of the blue and giving them the job. So it's worked out spectacularly well for Leinster and for Ireland.
He has a team now in the image of their master, you say, and never more true than maybe yesterday. And throughout this Six Nations, a team meticulous in their preparation, in executing a game plan.
It's incredible. Like, you look at the table. We have the table there.
The table gets confusing when you add in the 3 bonus points for winning the Grand Slam, as I discovered when I spent about 20 minutes looking at it last night trying to figure out how this has happened and whether I had totally got the rules of the Six Nations wrong.
Yeah, I spun Hugh a trivia question outside of it. Had England and France ever finished 4th and 5th before? And he basically said, I don't know.
I don't think.
But it must be unusual. In the
France were poor in like the 50s and stuff, but France and England down the bottom,
Recent
Ireland
times.
streets ahead at the top. And I know what you're saying about the extra bonus points, but it's phenomenal. Look at the young fellas. When I was 20 or 21, going to Twickenham, I'd be worried about, do I get on the right tube? You'd be nervous, do I have the right ticket? These guys are running out in front of 70,000 people and producing like that. James Ryan, this second row at that age, a handful of professional games, and he's playing like that. You could list off the names. Dan Levy, what he's done with the systems, and they all trust in it, and there never seems to be a panic whatever situation they're in, which is, it's just incredible.
Granted, we're having this conversation the day after Ireland win at Twickenham to seal a Grand Slam. Do rugby writers write about rugby in a far more positive manner than football writers write about football in this country?
I don't know. I suppose
you're always looking for the negatives.
You can talk about the material of what you're working with, and you're also probably speaking in the context of, I guess, there's that closeness when you're covering Munster and Leinster, and you're seeing the players every day, every week, you're around them, you're with them, does that subliminally have an impact on coverage? But they're generally contending and doing things at a high enough level. I don't know. I think I obviously would feel that at times any comparisons between the sports in terms of achievement are naturally harsh because of the level of competition that one faces relative to the other. And I think actually in recent years, I don't think there's been really that many instances of vitriolic sort of coverage of the football team. I'm thinking, with the exception of stuff coming out of a TV studio, I don't think really there's been anything that OTT or anything that's become a real talking point. You mentioned the press conference before Staunton and Cyprus that time, and that was a particularly fraught time, and that was probably as low as it got. As it happened, the start of this campaign, there was all sorts of talk. I know people that aren't that really energised by the relationship between the rugby media and the rugby team. So clearly there's no feeling on the inside of the camp that they're getting an easy ride, regardless of what people might think outside it. But I think football-wise, last couple of years, things have been. I think there's been an element of realism, I think, and stuff. I know we there's always an expectation of the team that do well, but I can't think of any obvious flashpoints beyond maybe some of the...
Should there have been more vitriol though about the Stoke City thing?
I think
it's pretty unseemly, the whole...
The SAG, I think there was a bit of criticism, I think, for how it panned out. And I think O'Neill got a fair bit of grief. But again, the public sometimes... respond to these things. If Ireland had lost their first game in the Six Nations, if Ireland lose in France, and the build up to that game had been sort of fraught for various reasons, then the public might have been in a mood of this is unacceptable, and so the coverage that goes with it, they're supportive of it and want heads, and we want people to go for it. I think around the time of O'Neill and Stoke, it was noticeable that the public mood was very much against them, and
or they simply didn't care,
or they were indifferent. Actually, I think to be honest, there was an element of indifference. Like, I think, for example, after Ireland lost 5-1 to Denmark, I don't think it really went nuts, in terms of individual players being set aside and sought out. But I mean, Hugh knows far more about the rugby terrain than me. Clearly the players and the coaches don't feel that they're getting a huge positive whack of coverage, regardless of what you might think or what other people might think.
Like in rugby, I think people are almost reaching for criticism. Like, there was all that stuff about the style. I mean, Shane McGrath puts it very well here. He says, if I can read it, some who suffer from terminal me-mindedness have alleged there is a joylessness in how Ireland play. These critics have presumably forgotten the years when Ireland were humiliated in Paris, London, and often in Dublin, when they conceded totals that could have fallen off a cricket scoreboard. Tell the Irish supporters who disappeared into the London snow last night, untroubled by the wicked cold or the unrelenting showers, that this wasn't joyful. Do you know, like the style that Schmidt did, particularly in the first 4 games. I mean, yesterday was the best game of the championship. It was regimented. People were calling it robotic, but like, the winning is everything, and he's shown now that he had that try that CJ Stander scored yesterday. That was brilliant to watch. Stockdale is just electric, and that's all part of the Schmidt system. So it's very hard to find areas to criticise Ireland, obviously on the back of a Grand Slam, but in general terms. But
the flip side of this, though, it's probably just going to ratchet it up to the World Cup, where they're going to have a level of expectation. I know they've had it before, but it's going to be at this unbelievable level. And if there is another World Cup disappointment, then it's going to be brutal, probably, to fall out. There's this level of expectation and pressure that's going to come into that is going to put them on that pedestal to be shot down from. Unfortunately, this is in some ways the only way to go from here. It can be down, and it's how you saw with the younger players who seem to be, they've probably only known winning to a certain degree, and they're going to see the other side of it, I guess, at some stage,
the World Cup
how they respond to it.
Like, the World Cup thing is it's going to be dominated from here on in, even with another Six Nations to come. Well, it's just been, Ireland have played 8 World Cups and they've imploded at every one of them. I mean, we beat Australia in 2011 and then we're beaten out the gate by Wales, 2007 obviously. But Schmidt himself tasted failure in 2015, and that's been put down to injuries, but it was also down to a defensive frailty in the first 20 minutes. And the most impressive thing is how he's reacted to that. Like, we stood off Argentina in those first 20 minutes, and according to the Schmidt system, as he's proven, it shouldn't matter who's playing, they should slot into the system. So it wasn't just down to the injuries, and his response to that was to bring in Andy Farrell, who's a defensive coach defined by rush defence or rushing up at line speed, and then he starts developing younger players. I mean, eight players in this Grand Slam were tasting Six Nations for the first time. How good are they going to be September 2019? So he's reacted to 2015 World Cup. And to win a Grand Slam while building towards a World Cup is just incredible. So, the World Cup is now the goal, and that's what everything's driving towards, I think.
There's thousands upon thousands of words written about the Grand Slam success. So what else stood out? I'm looking at Bernard Jackman, describes it as the greatest Irish rugby squad of all time. Also a reminder of a lot of those young players, which is important to remember. We talk about the rapid rise to stardom, that actually most of them have had their setbacks some greater than others in terms of injuries, in terms of even Jacob Stockdale coming into this tournament. Lots of question marks about his defence, the way he performed for the interprovincials over the Christmas. Should he, as good as he had been in November, should he be the starting winger for Ireland? All of that sort of blown out of the water over the last few weeks. And also what comes up as well is the way that the IRFU are able to run Irish rugby and improvements they've made. Jackman turns on that, so too does Brendan Fanning, about Ulster, who are probably the big losers in all of this, it seems, sacrificing Ruan Pienaar. John Cooney comes in. Now Ireland have a scrum half in all 4 provinces, and how Ireland are getting better as well, with all the players coming through at Leinster, getting better at moving players around through the provinces, but probably need to get even better again. There's not this stockpiling of talent at Leinster and Munster. That
bit jumped out at me now, because it infuriated me. I remember reading the pieces when Pienaar left, and this kind of, what about the children's stuff? His family were here, his kids were born here, all this stuff. The guy was on about 400 grand sterling, he wasn't there for the scenery. And it was clearly the right move by David Newsford to bring John Cooney in. And when that became a success, the same people were writing pieces saying, this was always going to be, this is a great move. I hate that flip-flop stuff. So, but no, you're right. The moving players around thing is a big part of, as Brendan says, the strategic planning. And it's all geared towards that, and we're heading the right direction. And Bernard Jackman's saying the same thing. So it feels like all the different strands of the game here are pulling in the same direction, which is massive.
Brendan Fanning says as well, Andy Farrell likely to succeed Schmidt as head coach in 2019. Does this performance, this Six Nations, just reinforce that?
Well, he certainly has. He's certainly the most touted, and he has the presence for it. I mean, look, you were talking about Stockdale there. The defensive issues are still there. I mean, Stockdale's like I'm trying to think of some analogy from Dan. Like, it was a Newcastle in the 90s under Keegan. You score 3, we score 4.
Yeah.
Like we shipped 3 tries yesterday, and they were all out wide again, including the kick through for the Daly's first one. So there is an issue out wide, but we're overcoming it, and we've time to work on it before the World Cup. So it's that side of things is all very positive, and Farrell's defence helped land a Grand Slam, and he's got huge status on the back of the Leinster as well. So you would have no problem with him as head coach.
Something that'll be interesting over the next few days is probably the fallout from an English point of view, and already we see it. There will be no shortage of people ready to put the boot into Eddie Jones. Clive Woodward's writing in the Mail on Sunday, and he says, I've written this before about Eddie, partially because he's a big personality who the media will naturally latch on to. He's become too much of the show. There have been way too many distractions this season. You can't operate long term like that. It saps your energy. The team loses focus. It's time for Eddie and his coaching staff to go to ground. Time for a period of silence. They're workaholics. Eddie sets the tone in this respect. 4 a.m. texting sessions to players when he can't sleep. Everybody now just needs to hit the beach.
Yeah,
which isn't going to happen in English rugby.
He's just like, I mean, there was it Phil Kearns came out a couple of years ago and said, the former Australian hooker, and who had Noah Jones from Australia, and he said there'll be 2 great years of success under Jones, and then there's a human cost, and things will fall away, and that's what's panning out. I mean, at the Times headline, not bad for a scummy nation, Eddie. Maybe over the top, but that stuff didn't help. I mean, you looked at Peter O'Mahony at Thursday's press conference when he was asked about it, and he's saying all the right things straight bat. I mean, Ireland played it beautifully, but you could see him kind of simmering away there like that. It was disrespectful. It was needless, and I know it was leaked in the week of the game, coincidentally. But Jones has just made one wrong step after another.
Yeah. Do you think he survives?
The media are on his case now in England, and that carries a lot of. Like Martin Johnson was on off the ball there during the week talking about his big regret when he was in charge of England was getting the media game wrong. He didn't appreciate the importance of it. And Jones, like, it's grand when you're winning. Jones can be smart and lippy and all he wants, but once you start losing, so it's looking grim for him.
But isn't that the point though? Was Schmidt's relationship good or not? It's irrelevant now. No one cares. The team wins, and that's it. No one cares about. No one gives a damn about relations. That stuff becomes like, again, when you back to the Martin O'Neill one, when he's lost the fans a small bit, then his interviews with Tony O'Donoghue, whoever, it's a disgrace. If the team had qualified for the World Cup, if the team had qualified for the World Cup and he was a bit chippy, everyone's like, oh well, listen, come on, he's brought us there. What the hell are you going on about? So that's always the reactive nature nature of these things.
Any other bits, Hugh, that you want to get to, or Dan? Anything?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a bit of Stephen Jones stuff as well. Maybe like the he's sort of I don't know how would you describe it, Hugh. I mean, he has actually been quite complimentary towards the Irish team, just in the context of, you know, all the luck they've had along the way when the games. I mean, there's some logic in what he says, in the sense that, you know, they when the professional game fell the way it did, they are able to control things through a provincial system in a way that the other major nations around aren't able to do, and that gives them obviously a control over their players. But it is a few lines in here now. Take the Irish bid for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Every Irishman was affronted that they were not chosen, as if their bid was some kind of heady vision of cutting-edge technology and universal spectator experience. It was actually, in relation to the other bids, a pie and a pint affair, but you will never find an Irishman to this day who was not still affronted.
That's some crazy
Are
statement.
you affronted?
No, I'm not.
I wasn't affronted.
The point of the pint description.
No.
The point of the pints description is like I'm just embarrassed by that whole thing. I didn't think it was a bad bid, now, to be fair, but like not factoring in, you know, the French had spent 70 odd million or whatever it was extra. It was very naive.
Our politicians were offended. I see Leo sent a good luck message yesterday with the Ivory Coast flag and an American football. I mean, maybe he can claim that he was in America and that was the only emoji option at the time, but
Google Translate just changes it to an
American just naturally.
Does he not have a point? The unity of purpose is such that there are still people who believe Neil Back cost Munster a European final against Leicester by tripping the ball out of Peter Stringer's hands at the put-in. I think he's dead right about that.
Do those people
out of Limerick for a few days?
They do exist, yeah. But no, the players themselves would say that, you know, they'd have done the same thing in the same circumstances. No, like the biggest laugh at the championship was people trying to suggest against Scotland and Wales that Ireland would do it because they hadn't voted for our World Cup bid. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, the Irish president was interviewed on the pitch, wasn't he? Saying that it was brought up at the dinner the night before.
Oh yeah, the Blazer Wars.
Yes, exactly. Anything else I see? You've got Ian McGeechan, a lot of praise for Andy Farrell from Ian McGeechan. Stephen Jones saying that 2018 better than 2009. Stuart Barnes saying that they made a massive mistake. Eddie Jones playing Farrell at 10, quite scathing, and Jonathan Joseph. David Walsh says Schmidt's going to be the next Lions coach. He'll have to be. Peter O'Reilly on Johnny Sexton's greatness. Any of those stand out?
I wonder about the Lions stuff. Would Schmidt want to coach the Lions? I don't know. I thought it was a bit weird for Warren Gatland going back to coach against his countrymen, you know. I don't know, was that one?
Well, also Joe Schmidt, it's probably far too premature to be almost thinking about that, because where's Schmidt's going to be in his life by 2021, or even maybe it works perfectly. He's thinking about moving back to the Southern Hemisphere, finishes with Ireland at the 2019 World Cup, and you've got a nice handy gig.
The can't be just have it inside his head, but I'd imagine that would be the way to do it. You know, go for the World Cup with Ireland and then head home, and because like his standing at home, looking at the New Zealand reaction to this is massive now. So like he would be the next guy.
Our Sunday pay-per-view is brought to you with Air, the home of Air Sport. Get amazing live sporting content free with Air Broadband. We have Hugh Farrelly and Dan McDonnell with us in studio. You can get your text in 53106 at Off The Ball on Twitter. We're live on all our social channels as well if you want to watch the pay-per-view. We'll take a quick break and we'll get through some of the other stories in today's papers.
The Sunday Papers on Off The Ball.
In association with the Air Sport app, allowing you to cast your favourite sporting action from your tablet or mobile phone straight to your TV.
The Hard Shoulder.
Don't you just love it? I mean, the build-up was that Leo was going to give a dressing down and a lecture about LGBT rights, climate change, immigrants. And do you play golf? Oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, sycophantic or what? I mean, you know, that's what we do best in this country, lick ass. So it's our national pastime.
The Hard Shoulder with Ivan Yates. Weekdays from 4 on News Talk.
Incognito, the art initiative for the Jack and Jill Children's Foundation, is back. Over 1,500 postcard-sized original pieces by artists including Tracy Emin, Martin Gale, Mo Kelly, Nick Miller, Abigail O'Brien and Richard Gorman. Yours for just €50 each. First come, first served in the Solomon Gallery, Friday 6th to Sunday 8th of April. The catch? You don't know the artist's name until you buy the art. Previewed at the Solomon on April 4th and 5th and on incognito.ie. Proudly supported by William Fry.
Here we go. Ooh! At Leia Healthcare, we're for the tumbles, jumps and bumps in life. Oh God, that's why we've recorded this, with me rolling down a hill like a mad yoke for the first time since I was teeny tiny. See, at Leia Healthcare, we're for living, because no matter who you are or what you do, it's good to live. Find out more at leiahealthcare.ie. Leia Healthcare, looking after you always.
Insurance provided by Ellipse Insurance Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare. Leia Healthcare Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare and Leia Life, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
When that niggling pain builds into something that makes it difficult to even think straight, try new Salpa Extra. With its dual-action formula of paracetamol and caffeine, it treats pain fast. Because it's soluble, Salpa Extra gets to work 2 times faster than standard paracetamol tablets, based on absorption data. For pain, think new Salpa Extra. Acts fast so you can get back to life. Ask your pharmacist for advice. Salpa Extra soluble tablets for the treatment of mild to moderate pain. Always read the leaflet.
Studying the MBA at NCI has been a game changer. It's like a passport to business success. I'm Michael Lee, MBA.
The MBA at National College of Ireland gives you a world-class qualification with expert faculty in a convenient IFSC location. Find out more at our Taste of an MBA event on Thursday, March 22nd from 6 p.m. Call 1850 221 721 or visit www.ncirl.ie.
Everyone always says you need to give it 100%, or better yet, 110%. But what if you were to give it 0%? A whole lot of nothing. In fact, we think 0 is the perfect percentage to give. That's why from now until the 31st of March, you can drive off in the brand new Opel Grandland X with 0% APR finance. Zero. Zilch. Nada. And to make sure you get to truly experience everything the Grandland X has to offer, you can even take it home for a full 24-hour test drive experience. Book your 24-hour test drive today at opel.ie and drive home in the new Grandland X 100% happy with 0% APR. Opel. The future is everyone's. Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Deposit required. This is a hire purchase agreement provided by Bank of Ireland Finance, a registered trading name of Bank of Ireland. Available at participating dealers.
Hi, my name is Gary, and I've come through some really difficult times in my life. I started to run small little amounts. It was slow, but it was great. Running, it's my be-all and end-all in terms of managing my mental health.
When we go through tough times, little things can make a big difference to your mental health. Visit yourmentalhealth.ie. Brought to you by the HSC.
Get active at Outdoor Revolution, Ireland's biggest sports, adventure, health and wellness event. Join leading sports stars and experts. Sean Kelly, Stuart Lancaster, David Gillick, Niamh Briggs, Stephen Hunt, Ross Purcell and many more. March 24th and 25th at the RDS Dublin. Enjoy free classes, workshops, cooking demos and expert discussion. 10% of Outdoor Revolution ticket sales go to Pieta House. Book yours now at outdoorrevolution.ie.
At Bruce Betting, we're celebrating 40 years as one of Ireland's leading bookmakers with the launch of our brand new website and iOS app. Packed with features and easy to use, the new Bruce Betting app includes ACCA insurance, cash out and live casino. Bruce Betting, giving you more. In store, online and now on your phone. Please gamble responsibly.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
In association with Air. Watch every UEFA Champions League and Europa League game on the Air Sport Pack.
This is News Talk.
Welcome back to the Sunday Paper Review. Hugh Farrelly of the Irish Daily Mail is in studio alongside Dan McDonnell from the Irish Independent. We have been talking about rugby non-stop really since 1 o'clock today, so why not move on to some of the other stories? And there are some interesting stories in the papers today that we'll get to, starting down with Cheltenham.
Bit of Cheltenham stuff, yeah, maybe a bit more up my street, but there's almost a crossover in the team here. There's good Cheltenham stuff across all the Sundays, and Tommy Conlon has a good piece in the Sunday Indo on some of the media coverage, but probably drawn a bit to Dennis Walsh's piece in the Sunday Times about the green power. Is Irish dominance good for Cheltenham? Because a bit like, I suppose, the rugby yesterday, they're the Irish trainers is like this clinical winning machine. We're used to sort of a certain Irish way of winning things. There's always that last minute or drama, or there's a sort of we almost see ourselves as unprofessional at times in terms of how we do things, and we joke about it. But actually, what you've seen this week is just the best. And in the horse racing context, in terms of Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott and what they're doing, it's incredible. It's just relentless. They're breaking records with no respect for almost what's gone before, and it's led to quite a fallout. Indeed, a fallout across the water, where they're now their press on Friday and Saturday were doing stuff about, we need to look at how these horses are being handicapped. Is there reviews of what we're doing? Even through in a couple of references that we need to get doping procedures on the same lines as what we do over here. sort of trying to plant a seed or I don't know what the game
They're
plan
implying that we're doping our horses?
well, no, they weren't. They were just saying that the way in which the testing regulations are done here are different to the UK, and it's just the timing of it. It almost leads people to make that assumption. And I know there was actually one or two trainers on Twitter and stuff. Ger Lyons, an Irish flat trainer, went mad over actually the coverage, saying so you're almost trying to engage in innuendo here.
Is the handicapping thing dodgy?
No, it's not. I don't think so. I just think that there's so many good horses over here at the moment, without going into the handicap system in great detail, that Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott have so many good horses that the lesser lights in their stable are, because they're getting beaten here, they're being rated accordingly, and then you drop them into races in England and they're just at a higher level.
The headline on that piece, on Dennis Watch's piece, is Green Power, is Irish dominance good for Cheltenham? Does anyone care in Cheltenham whether it's an Irish horse or an English horse that wins?
Well, it's strange. It's getting to the point now where that was a bigger story. In 1989, Ireland had no winners at Cheltenham, and the whole theme of racing was any good Irish horse would be bought by some rich English owner, and the Irish wins did become a bit like victories because they were put upon, and this was a strike for the small man.
They were actually, though, the small man,
and now they're the Man City. Now they are they've got. I mean, ultimately, what's happened here is that you've got some very good trainers, and the big owners are now getting their horses trained in Ireland.
So you have three big owners in JP McManus, Michael O'Leary, and Rich Ritchie.
And Willie Mullins has a couple of other high flying owners as well.
Why then is the investment not coming into English racing anymore from the rich former owners who would bring horses to Paul Nicholls or to Nicky Henderson or anywhere else?
There's question marks. I think again there's the prize money over there wouldn't be as good. I think there'd be issues with the funding of the sport, and there is just this feeling that if you have a good horse and you want him to be, where you have a decision over where you want him to be trained, there's many reasons to go to Ireland over England. Quality of the trainers, the structure of the programme, and so on. But I mean, there is a point in some of the, is the Irish dominance a good thing? And I think it doesn't matter whether it's English or Irish. I think maybe what people like about racing sometimes, even people who aren't big into the sport. No, you wouldn't be a huge fan, Hugh, but there would be the little man story. Like, think of a horse like Denoli, who was an Irish horse in the 90s, Tom Foley, a trainer from Carlow. Everyone got behind it. It was a public horse. I guess when Michael O'Leary has another winner, there's no real romance in that. It's like, oh great, rich man wins another race. And what the Cheltenham probably lacked this year was a couple of those stories where there was this small yard with 3 or 4 horses coming and upsetting the big boys. There wasn't too much about that, and it's now led to this debate over where the sport is going. But and that's certainly there's a valid point, but I think. At the same time, the counterpoint, I would say, you look at someone like Gordon Elliott, he's not from racing stock. He's not someone who was, born into the game. He's like a self-made man in terms of his training credentials. Like, I remember 7 or 8 years ago, even being part of a syndicate that had a horse, brutal, sort of very low level, and Gordon Elliott would train anything. At that stage, he would go to the unglamorous race meetings. He'd be flying horses over to Perth and Sedgefield and all these places. Yeah, he was the
Scotland.
Yeah, and
did Gordon Elliott train your horse?
He took over one of our horses. It was Barrio, and he was trained by another trainer. Wasn't doing that well, and Gordon Elliott did such a good job. He took him from finishing around 20th out of 25 to like 7th, and that was as far as that was as far as Barrio.
Where is Barrio now? Did you go into punditry?
I have no idea. No, he didn't. He doesn't have a column or anything like that. So. Like
is he alive?
He's got. I don't know. In fairness, Elliott did the right thing.
You don't have an emotional attachment to these horses that you own.
I care to a point. In fairness to Elliott, he actually did the right thing by us. I mean, it's only a small thing. He wouldn't even remember this, but he took the horse to race in England in a lower grade race, and basically got an offer and sold it, and didn't string us along for like 6 months or a year and take our fees for a bad horse. Effectively, he did the right thing by us. And now, but you go from that and that low level stuff to 7 years later or whatever it is, and he's training 8 winners at Cheltenham on the strength of his training ability, and he is the guy. His strike rate relative to numbers to runners is brilliant, and this guy he's a colossus. And Mullins is the same, but Mullins probably has come from a bit more of a racing background. I think Elliott is an amazing story, but is it good for Cheltenham? I mean, I'm not bored of having a lot of good horses trained in Ireland. It means when you go to Leopardstown last month to that Dublin Racing Festival, you're watching like elite racing. You turn on English racing some Saturdays and it's pretty poor fare.
Maybe that is actually the greater issue. It's not how this affects Cheltenham, because Cheltenham will always be fine. The behemoth it's become, you're always going to get 100,000 people there on the Friday. It's actually those run-of-the-mill meetings on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that they've little or no prize money, which again maybe is one of the bigger issues for English racing.
It's not competitive.
Whereas there used to be, I think the frustration now in Irish racing is that the English raiders don't come over to Leopardstown or Punchestown because they're probably frightened off because the horses simply aren't good enough.
No, and it is true though. I mean, I think for the smaller racing owners here, it can be difficult. You know, you will turn on the race on a Saturday or Sunday and it'll be 4 or 5 Willie Mullins winners or Elliott winners, and it's that bit harder to get your shot at glory. And even during the week, it's mentioned Dennis Walsh's piece, there was like a sales in Cheltenham on Thursday, and all the top lots, you know, sort of eye-watering figures, like JP McManus paid 330,000 sterling for a horse. Next up, you know, Willie Mullins paying 240,000. You know,
where does the sales happen?
This was at Cheltenham. They have a sales on Thursday after racing of like young pointers and stuff, all mostly coming from Ireland. And I mean, all the big shots are obviously in the one place for the week, and they bid. Now, you know, Colin Tizard again, who won the Gold Cup on Friday, and he is a slightly smaller trainer. He still has a horse in his yard, as he points out. Fleming's Hill arrived after winning an Irish point to point for 480,000 sterling. You know, so there's a lot of money being spent.
Horse won anything back?
With Fleming's, it's early days for him. It's early days, but he will be under pressure. Like Finian's Oscar, who flopped during the week, it was 250 grand. So that's out of the price range of your 6 lads getting together after a few pints and waking up having accidentally bought a horse. You know,
it's very from personal experience.
Yeah. You know, you're not going to wake up in the morning, I don't think, and figure out, Jesus, like, I'm after buying a fifth of a horse for, you know, 400 grand last night. So those people probably have been priced out of it in terms of success, and it is a valid point. But I think it's just a role reversal for us, that we are used to being the outsiders and to being, you know, the underdogs. Like if you were to like characterise the Irish sporting story, it would be an underdog one. Whereas now in racing, we are the opposite. We are the overlords that are sort of maybe ruining it for everyone else. But I think there's people in the game who can probably get used to that.
Who else is writing about Cheltenham? Eamon Sweeney loves to write about the horses.
Yeah, Fergie McDonnell as well, and the
romance of it. Tommy Conlon talks through a story from watching ITV, which I actually thought the ITV coverage was very good.
Yeah, it was
during the week.
It was decent.
It gets the balance right of an incident between Matt Chapman and Tony McCoy. I had read sort of about this. I didn't realise the full extent of how hard Matt Chapman, who is sort of a Marmite figure in racing.
Well, Matt Chapman is like the court jester figure, really.
I thought he was preposterous. Like, he was going for the John McCreer thing, was he?
Well, a bit of that, but I think what happened, really what it boils down to was, and I think there is, like in every sport, and we experience it as a media point of view, you know, if you're critical of someone, well, how many games have you played, how many caps have you won, you know, so on. And, you know, in the sport of racing in particular, you know, how many winners have you ridden? And when it's such a brutal sport that jockeys put their life on the line all the time, I can understand why they would be protective of their own when they're getting a bit of criticism. And what happened in this instance was ultimately AP McCoy still working for JP McManus, having previously been his retained jockey. JP McManus' horse called Glenlow was beaten narrowly on Thursday in the Pertemps after a big gamble, and Barry Geraghty, a lot of people were critical of his performance. He was beaten narrowly and he could have done more. Chapman articulated this point in strong terms. He wasn't happy with McCoy and Luke Harvey both saying any criticism of this is nonsense. And as Tommy Conlon points out, come on AP and Luke, you challenge. Every punter watching that race would have said if Barry Geraghty didn't sit like he did, this was coming into the last where he was a bit cautious and the horse made a mistake, he would have won. Now, it's all very well sitting like that if you don't make a mistake, but the only thing that beat Glenlow there was the mistake at the final hurdle. Without that mistake, he would categorically have won. And in many ways, Chapman's role is to articulate the punter's voice, to see what the guy throwing his docket at home is saying. And a lot of people were out there, and I mean, I backed the horse myself.
So did I.
But McCoy just wasn't having it. He wasn't having it at all. And I mean, Tommy, I think he doesn't really offer his full opinion, but I think you can read through it that he probably is with Chapman more so. He points out that Geraghty afterwards described the horse as a big baby. He just looked around and lost a bit of momentum. Tommy points out what Glenlow is a 7-year-old. The horse that beat it, Delta Work, is 5 now. He's a Giggins 10 horse. Some National Hunt horses are very slow to mature, but that's beside the point. But anyway, McCoy ended up saying Barry Geraghty's ridden a lot more winners, he said, than the clown who just asked the question. And that was the end of that. But like Chapman is the
he's a bit clownish.
He is. That's his role,
Tommy refers to him as the self-proclaimed punter's friend, and he's shouting and hollering, and
he's not everyone's cup of tea.
No,
but I think
there's a bravery though in taking on somebody of the personality of Tony McCoy, and anyone who's ever followed his career or say watched the documentary on McCoy would know he's pretty unique individual. He doesn't suffer fools. He's maybe not quite as far as Roy Keenan not suffering fools. He's probably on the Ronan O'Gara kind of level. He'll take you down like that.
He's
to turn around and say McCoy used to ride for the pipe team. They had a bloke called Chester Barnes. He used to carry Pipey's bags, clean his shoes. Now McCoy does that for JP McManus. That's what he does.
Yeah, exactly. And then he actually threw to him and said, now, because this was ahead of this race, and there was McManus money in the ring on his horses, and McCoy had been quiet. And Chapman did finish his sign off by saying, now, shoe cleaner, which one is JP lumped on? And it did shoot the camera to McCoy, stony faced. It was good. I was watching that particular moment. And really what it comes down to is it was good TV.
Yeah.
And this is the
showbiz, baby.
Whether you like it or not, it was actually good TV in that point. And I think racing sometimes needs that, because it can be a world that's hard to penetrate from the outside. Everyone knows everyone. They'll close ranks. They will defend each other in any circumstances. And someone who's from outside that sort of circle having a bit of a pop, I'm okay with it. It actually
it's increased his profile now anyway.
Well, it did increase his profile. Though Chapman, it must be said, off the back of ITV Racing, he ended up on Dancing on Ice.
He only lasted a week.
One episode and he was done, because it became a story at the time. Nathan maybe might even have a look, but his style didn't really transfer to the ice dancing world.
I'm not quite at Joe Malloy, ignoring Tiger and the golf while watching Room to Improve instead level.
Oh, I saw that.
A little bit earlier on, he's denied it all, but anyways, that's another
he obviously
story.
had it recorded, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course, skipping the ads. A couple of other pieces. Actually, you were interested in maybe something that didn't get much attention, and we touched on this on yesterday's show as well, which were the club finals. Totally overshadowed by the Six Nations, both on television yesterday, where we had one of the great performances from Cura Finn, and then followed by one of the great hurling finals between Coola and the Piercing, and very little coverage.
It's tough for GA at the moment. They're in this kind of phony war with the league, where the media are trying to drum up strong news lines from the league, and then everyone comes out and says, Arsha, it's only the league, let's wait for the summer. You've got all this fixtures controversy. But no, I'm not a GA man, but I do tune in, and the club stuff I find compelling, and I just felt like it just got lost yesterday completely. And even when you look at the papers, it's not getting as much space as it would ordinarily. This is a signature day, the club finals, and I just felt sorry for the. I know. Did you get the attendances down?
No, I didn't. I actually flicked over to a bit of it just during the rugby.
It was very sparsely.
Yeah, it looked like it, and obviously there was a stubbornness that they.
Is it
admirable that you stick with your
attitude?
Well, you stick with your tradition. Like the Patrick's Day is the day for the finals, and they refused to move. That's ultimately what happened, isn't it? They
ultimately, it seems that way. Now there's full rounds of league games today and all that. Maybe they didn't want to clash with those as well. And
to be fair, they weren't to know it was going to be a Grand Slam game until last week. So there is an element.
But even still, it was known. I'm pretty sure, because the way they do the fixtures for the Six Nations in a 2-year cycle,
well in advance.
It was known probably 18 months, 2 years ago, that this Ireland
Saturday
was going to be on the Saturday
anyway.
Yeah, but I don't think it would have been. In fairness, I don't think if it hadn't been a Grand Slam match, I'm not sure if England Ireland would have had the same. If it was a dead rubber type affair, or not the biggest game of all of recent memory.
4 pages of coverage rather than 12 pages.
Yeah, I think so. There would be no wraparounds for that. But it is noticed. But it is sad, because I think these are the stories that the readers can buy into. Tell me the story of these people, these club players, and it's an afterthought today, really, in terms. It's been a lot of the staff guys.
Up in yesterday's
a lot of staff guys have covered it, and they're there. But I'm sure they're pitching to try and get it covered as much as is possible. But in a Cheltenham week as well. This is a big week for papers, for media. As there's a lot going on, Champions League, and it just seems that it's just sort of slid under the radar completely.
There was a gas story that jumped out, Nathan. Philip Lanigan in the Mail, Keith Higgins hurling. That's interesting. And the line that's taken is, the headline is there no limit to the heartache, suggesting that after years and years of this kind of...
Well, he's just won the Division 2B title today with Mayo, and Mayo have taken an almighty beating in the football from Tyrone. So right now it certainly seems he's making the right decision.
It's implying that he might just...
That might be it, and he might stick with the hurlers.
That's a massive call to make. I mean, Mayo hurling by comparison, I mean...
Yeah, it'll be huge, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I do know hurling has always been his first love, but he's such a multi-talented sports person. He's one of Mayo's greatest ever players. You would imagine the pressure will really come on from to return to the footballers. But listen, he's enjoying his hurling, so yeah, the questions
huge
will
pressure
be
on him
asked.
to come back, though, wouldn't there? Like
Absolutely.
Philip says it's the
massive
first time
pressure
he's devoted his time exclusively to the hurlers. So this is
yeah, he plays the odd game here and there, but listen, they've reaped the rewards. They've won the Division 2B title today. A couple of other quick bits and pieces to finish up with. Richard Dunn, who I sort of assumed when he retired, and I think he sort of mentions this himself in his interview with Paul Rowan, was going to disappear to his new life in Monaco and would never be seen of or heard of again, had no real interest in the modern game, and would be happy to sit, relax and enjoy his life. But actually, he admits during this he's really getting sucked back into it.
Yeah, well, I think we might have spoken to him in Euro 2016. I think he did a road show, didn't he? And I remember speaking to him about it that night, just that you did
That's what turned it.
Yeah, that was it.
These guys are so great.
Yeah, I want back. I want to be around this. But I think at that stage, I think he was definitely, talking about indifference earlier, he was sort of indifferent to going down that pundit route. And it's funny how the lads from his generation, in some ways, not exclusively, but like the first generation of guys who maybe didn't really need to go back into it, as he touches on, that he made so much money over 20 years, and it seems like he would have minded it wisely enough. And like Damien Duff would be another one in this category. Yet they've ended up going into punditry. Duff's case, obviously working with Shamrock Rovers, and Dunn now, although living in Monaco and living in his idyllic life over in Monaco, he is now getting involved in, he's trying to set up a soccer school in Monaco. I think part of it is his son is 9 years old, he's big into football, and Dunn through that has got into kids coaching and that line of work. But now he is thinking about doing his badges through the IFA in Belfast, and he might be someone that we see back. I know he's been on this show regularly, and I think he's very good, and in terms of his ability to sort of describe defending and see things through. And it's not something we would have expected when Richard Dunn was 22, 23, that he would somehow become a statesman-like figure in a football context, whereas actually there's a certain gravitas when he speaks now that he's earned, and he's adapted well to this part of his life, to this phase of his life.
And almost going back to the Martin O'Neill conversation, he was at the time, I think you were in studio that night, he was on with us, and he is here again, one of the few former players who has been very critical of the way Martin O'Neill has handled the whole situation, with that line, which is the headline actually: Martin O'Neill is not bothered if he signs for Ireland or signs for Stoke, so why should we be bothered?
That's very pertinent, I think. That's what a lot of people are feeling,
Yeah, and it is. We have an Irish trip, to Turkey this week, probably coming off the back of a successful week in other codes. And again, I just think the comparisons are unfair.
If Ireland lose to Turkey, does the heat come on, or is it just a friendly? Well,
I just wonder. I think, it can be juxtaposed against success elsewhere, and where are we at? Are we accepting a level? I think because there's new players coming in, and there'll be probably a load of new caps on Friday, I think there's a certain freshness with that, and it can be sold as the start of an era. But I still think he's lost the credit that was in the bank from before. So if you get hammered in a friendly against Turkey or against France in the summer, it will lead to a reaction that would, I think, be stronger than a normal friendly loss.
A nice piece of honesty as well from Richard Dunn as we wrap up. The last club who came looking for services in the autumn of 2015 was Bolton Wanderers when Neil Lennon was manager. I checked the fixture list. They were away against Rotherham on Boxing Day. My instant reaction was, nah.
Yeah, go to Monaco instead. Yeah, I think it's a life choice, Rotherham or Monaco. I don't know which way would you lean.
I
go for Rotherham.
A pretty easy
Premier
answer.
in Rotherham or something. No?
And Turk.
It's a really good piece with Paul Rome, where he talks about handing out advice to Lilian Thuram's son at the Monaco Academy as well. And
that was interesting, where they said the players didn't disrespected him, or the young fellas disrespected him. Didn't want to hear about the cleaning boots back in the 90s.
But they don't need to clean boots, I suspect, when you're at the under-9s at Monaco somehow. He did tell the story here previously about his son who was involved with the Monaco under-9s, and how Monaco are in an interesting position in world underage football, because Monaco's a very small place. There's not that many children around the place. It's not as if they have this huge catchment area, and actually they don't go out and try and sign the best players from around the world. So his son is playing for the Monaco under-9s, but because of the name of the club, they get invited to all the best tournaments in the world. So they were going off playing in a tournament with Juventus and Roma and Manchester City's underage team, the best academies in the world, whereas essentially Monaco are a local club,
team.
and they were going over and they were getting absolutely hammered by everybody, but having the time of their lives.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to live. It would be a different, you know, the Glasgow Celtic team that won the European Cup were all brought up within 15 or 20 miles. I'm not sure if Monaco is the same sort of romance in that story. They all brought up together, you know.
It's a nice romance in them all coming together from all around the world.
All the sort of various rich people's parents that have come to live there.
How much did your boots cost? 300 quid. What? Mine are signed by Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, definitely. Dressing room tales will be interesting.
We're going to leave it at that, lads. Thanks a lot for coming in. Thanks. Hugh, your first time on the show. Great to have you in. Dan, as always, first choice.
Sub.
Regardless of what the text message
could have been a rugby guest meant to be here, morning. But anyway.
Our Sunday pay-per-view is brought to you with Air, the home of Air Sport. Get amazing live sporting content free with Air Broadband. Dave is going to come in, run us down through all the day's GAA scores, and we're going to be talking to Butch Harmon as well. Up next.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
Why is it that people would rather go to the dentist than have their car serviced? Thankfully at toyotaservice.ie, we're changing that. 9 out of 10 of our customers would definitely recommend a Toyota service to their friends and family. Whether you need a courtesy car, Wi-Fi, or just a cup of tea, we'll take the very best care of you and your Toyota. To hear what our customers